Hey everyone! In today's video I thought we could work on creating a retro travel postcard but with a quarantine theme. So I'm going to show you how to bring in a background image and give it this cool duo tone, how to bring in some text and manipulate it to make it a little bit more dynamic, as well as how to knock out the fill of that text so you can replace it with your own picture of however you are writing out this quarantine. So let's get started by making a new document. I'm going to go to File, New, and a postcard online is apparently 4 by 6. So let's go with 6 for the width, 4 for the height, and 300 for the resolution, so it'll look really crispy if you wanted to print this, or it'll look really good if you just wanted to text or email this to somebody too. So I'm going to hit Create. And let's first get started with our background. So if I'm gonna drag it from over here. There we go. Nice picture of Mount Rainier. So I'm gonna bring this guy down about here and hit enter to tell it to place it. And I don't like this crisp line from the horizon. So I'm going to select my Tacoma skyline layer, add a mask to it, and I'm going to select the gradient tool here on the left, and I'm going to use a gradient with a 100% black on one end and a 0% opacity white on one end. And if you need to adjust that, you can click on the top little bubble to select your opacity, and the bottom bubble will allow you to click and change the color. So with that gradient, I'm going to just drag up a little bit, and you'll notice as I'm dragging up, it is slowly erasing from the top, and it's giving it a very soft edge, which is going to make our next step a little bit easier. If you look on the mask on that layer, you'll notice the entire top part is black, which is basically hiding any part of that image, and the bottom part is white, which is revealing that Tacoma layer below. So that's how the mask is working if you're unfamiliar with those. Now this guy below, I'm gonna make sure it's unlocked, and I'm gonna tell this to, I'm just gonna pick a yellow at random, and I'm gonna click and hold on my gradient tool, which will let me choose the paint bucket tool. So if that was up initially, you can click and hold, and it will reveal the other tools hidden within that option. So I'm gonna use the paint bucket for this step, and I'm just gonna click once, and I have an okay looking gradient between the two images, but I want them to look a little bit more cohesive, like they were all one image, not one slapped on top of another. So I'm gonna come to my adjustments window on the right side here, and I'm gonna select my gradient map. And so what the gradient map is doing is taking, it's basically creating a black and white image of all of the layers below it, but instead of it being black and white, you can tell it to be, in this case, canary and a pretty ugly purple. Let's fix that. So I think the UW purple is 51 red, 0 green, and 111 for blue. That's looking very purple. And now with this gradient, you can grab your colors and adjust those to play with the severity, and as well as the bubble in between to shift the strength of that image. So, oof. Let's see if we can, accidentally added another one. Let's find something that we like. I'm not really liking any of these. Let me soften up this purple a little bit. And let's rearrange. Maybe that was the problem. Yeah, that's looking a lot better. And we'll call that good. So now it's time to start bringing in some of our text. So before I do that, I'm actually gonna throw these guys in a folder to keep my layers a little bit neater. And if you didn't catch that, I just selected the bottom one. I'm holding shift on the keyboard and selecting the top, so it'll select that entire range. And then I'm click on this little folder icon, and it's just gonna group all those into a folder that I'm going to rename BG for background. So now let's move on to text. I'm going to select my text tool on the toolbar on the left, and I'm gonna click and drag a text box, and I'm gonna have this say greetings from. So I'm gonna type that out. And cool, it made it the same color as my background. So I'm gonna hit Command A to select everything, even if I can't see it in this text box. And oh, it looks like my font was way too big too. Let's change that to maybe 24. There it is. And let's change this to, I don't know, let's make it white. And this is not a good font for this. I want something kind of curly and cursive. This lobster one looks perfect. So there we go. That looks pretty good, but it needs a little bit of contrast to stand out from that soft yellow. So I'm going to double click on my text layer in the layers panel, and that's going to bring up all my layer styles, and I'm going to add a drop shadow behind it. Now this drop shadow is way too soft. I want this to have a sharper edge. So I'm going to bring that slider for size down a bit. There we go. And I'm going to nudge this distance so it doesn't appear so far away. I just want that white font to pop a little bit more, and that looks good. So I'm going to hit OK, and now I'm going to move on to my big text in the middle. So I'm going to click and drag a big old text box. Yeah, that might do the job. And I'm going to write in my, whoops, let's go all caps, my couch. I don't know why that doesn't look like it's spelled right, but it is. And let's go with, I like this Quartzo Demo font. I don't know where I got it, but when I'm looking for these fonts, I'm looking for ones that have letters with very, very thick characteristics to it, and that are spaced closely together. That's going to give me the biggest frame to put my picture in later. So let's highlight all of these and scale them up as big as I can get onto one line. And that looks okay, but I don't like the spacing in between some of these letters. So let's highlight a couple. And in my properties window on the right, I can scroll down to the character section. And this guy here with the letters and the little horizontal arrow below is the spacing between each of those characters. So as I scoot this to the left, you can see that spacing getting a little bit smaller. I'm going to do some adjustments to this guy too. That looks all right. Now I just need to tweak these guys. That looks good. That's how it goes. You fix one thing and then another problem pops up. That's okay. And yeah, I'm liking that spacing. So to make some future edits a little bit easier, I'm going to change this from white and I'm going to make it black. I also want to give this guy a stroke, so I'm going to double click on my text layer and I'm going to find stroke, and it's already given me that kind of UW, I don't know, it's like a muddy gold, and I kind of dig it. Again, you could click on this color and select a new one if you would like. You can play with the size of your stroke as well. I'm happy with 13 there. And you can play with the opacity, bunch of stuff you can play with. I also want to give this guy a drop shadow, and I can't even see it. So let's bring that distance and really drag it out there. Now we're talking. Let's bring that opacity all the way up, and I want it to be a very sharp edge on the shadow, so I'm going to bring this all the way to 0 for the size. And now we're in good shape. So let's hit OK, and I want this text to be much taller, and I want it to have an upward angle too, to make it look a little bit more dynamic and like those old travel postcards. So I'm going to activate my move tool on the toolbar, and with these little bubbles, around my text box. If you're not seeing those guys, there's a little option up here. You can toggle them on and off with this button. And I'm gonna hover my arrow over, which one? This guy at the bottom. And I'm gonna hold Shift on the keyboard as I click and drag down, and that's gonna allow me to stretch and distort this text. And I think I like that height. So I'm gonna hit enter to tell it I'm done. And now I'm gonna hover towards this right side bubble, I don't know what you call it. And I'm gonna hold Command on my keyboard. I'm on a Mac, so if you're on PC, you're gonna hit Control on your keyboard. And you can see your arrow is gonna turn white, and it's also gonna have a little vertical arrow right below it. And why don't you work every time I try? As you click and drag, you can see that left side is like pinned down to where it's at, and I'm able to change the angle of the rest of the text by dragging around the right side, sorry. So I think I like that, and I'm just gonna position this guy down, and yeah, that's looking pretty good. Actually, let's bring you down just a smidge. There we go. And I'm gonna call that good and hit enter to tell it I'm done moving it. So now the tricky part of, actually, now that I'm looking at it, that could use a little bit of tweaking. There we go. So now the trickiest part of this tutorial, and that is going to be removing the fill from this text so we can pop in a image behind it. So there's probably a ton of ways you can do this. This is the way I've been doing it just because, I don't know, I like it and it makes sense. So I'm going to flatten all of these layers together to read as one image so I can cut out or mask out the fill of this text. So like that trick I showed you earlier, I'm going to select my bottom layer, hold Shift on the keyboard and select the top one, so it's going to select that entire range of files, and I'm gonna put them in a folder. I'm gonna call this Postcard, I don't know, top. This will make more sense in a moment. And to keep all of these layers intact in case I wanted to edit something later, I'm gonna click and drag this guy to the plus icon, and that's gonna create a copy of it. So I'm gonna hit the eyeball. This bottom postcard top folder is going to be my backup if I wanted to change anything later. This copy one, I'm going to right click and tell it to convert it to a smart object. So now it is reading this as one image and not a series of layers. And what that is going to allow me to do is apply a mask to it. So I'm going to click on the mask button. We got our fresh white mask here. And now I'm going to click on the selection tool in the toolbar. If you click and hold up here, it's going to be this middle one, quick selection tool. And the way this guy works is it is sampling the colors within your little quick selection tool. And it's looking at all the similar color pixels to the ones you're sampling, and it's adding it to the selection, which is represented by these marching ants or the little dotted lines moving around the screen. So now that I've sampled the fill of all of the text, I'm going to tell it, actually, no, I've got my whole selection made. So now I'm going to switch over to the brush tool, and with black selected as my color, you can also pick your color up here. I'm now able to just click and drag and paint out that fill. These little checkerboards that are showing up behind it are just showing you that what was in that fill is now transparent. So whenever you see checkerboards, it's showing you it's transparent or invisible behind it. All right, now that I have all of my fill, what are the words I'm looking for? Now that I've erased all of my fill, I can hit Command D to unselect, or Control D if you're on a PC. And now I'm ready to bring in my picture. And I'm going to drop the opacity down a little bit so that I can see the text in the background as I try to position this guy. And I think that one works. I have my subject framed nicely in the O, and the cat is also getting some good action in the my part. So I'm going to tell it that this is okay, and I'm going to drag my picture image below my postcard top copy layer, and I'm going to bring its opacity back to 100. So now I have my picture as the fill for that text. Now there's one more thing I want to touch up. I don't like how this donut hole is basically cutting out my subject. So I'm going to select the mask portion of that layer, and I'm going to turn back on my brush tool. Oh, it's already back on. And with black selected, I'm just going to brush that hole out. So there we go. We've got our fill in for our text with our background picture. For my finishing touches, I'm just going to give this guy a border. So I'm going to click on this, what do you call that, rectangle tool or whatever. And I'm going to drag it out. And cool, it's got a black fill. I don't want that. So I'm going to click on this guy for no fill. And it looks like I have this kind of cream color selected for the stroke. And I'm just going to slide this guy, a little bit too much, until it gives me a nice border around my card. And I think I like that. All right, so for the most part we're done, but I like throwing textures on top of stuff. So if you did a quick Google search of, I don't know, blank postcard textures, I think that's how I found this guy, you can bring in a blank postcard that's got all these neat little distressed marks and scratches and scrapes and all that cool stuff. And if you scale that to cover up your entire image, you're like, what the heck? It's covering up everything. With our layer selected, I can go to this little guy and play with the blend modes, which tells it to basically read this layer depending on its color values, light values, all that stuff. And I think I'm gonna go with multiply. And that multiply blend mode tells it to ignore all of the white or lighter values of it so that the background can show through it. That's how we're getting these little black speckle marks on top of it. It's a little heavy still, so I'm going to drop the opacity down a little bit. And you know, I think I'm going to call this one done. When you're happy with yours, you can go to File, Save As, and make sure you're going to change. Oh, come on, why aren't you showing it to me? Make sure you title this, and at the bottom down here there's going to be something that says Format Photoshop. Make sure you save it as a JPEG, or even a PNG will work, and that'll give you a file that you can send out for someone to print and send out a postcard, or you can just text and email it to somebody once you get that file. But hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you'd like any other help or get some one-on-one instruction for Photoshop, reach out to us at the Multimedia Lab and we'll help you out. Thanks.